Triangle Capital Corporation since October 2006. Previously, he was Group Vice President of J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. and founder of Navigant International Southeast Incorporated. Mr. Tucker's love of history served as the framework for his literary works, The High Tide of American Conservatism, Davis Coolidge in the 1924 election, and Conservative Heroes, 14 Leaders Who Shaped America from Jefferson to Reagan. He is a member of Darlington's class in 1965 and is a graduate of Washington and Lee University and Harvard Business School. While at Darlington, he was Vice President of the White Cabinet, co-editor of the Darlingtonian, Proctor, was a member of the soccer and tennis teams, PEP committee, and treasurer of the senior class. Today, he'll present Heroes in History. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tucker.
Olivia, thank you. What a privilege to be back in chapel after 51 years. It's a long time. It certainly brings back many, many memories. When they told me where to sit up there, I was very relieved that I wasn't sitting over there where Olivia is, because that's where Mr. Worth Moser always sat. And I was sure that I was not supposed to sit there, but it does bring back a lot of memories. Let me begin this morning with a few words of reassurance. First, even though it's been 51 years since I sat in your seats, I can well remember how irritating it was when speakers, it was irritating to students when speakers went over the allotted time. So I promise I'm going to watch the clock. And in further reassurance, I will tell you that my wife Grayson is with me today. It's her first trip to Darlington. And while she's very pleased to be here today to hear my talk, she's made it quite clear that she will not let me run into overtime. In fact, she's been known to cut me off, so if I just sit down abruptly, you'll know that she's sitting on the front row and she's done this. So if I disappear, that's what's happening. So within the tight confines of my allotted few minutes, I've got a number of things I want to try to cover with you this morning. The title of the talk is Heroes in History. I was invited to come and talk a little bit about the last book that I've written that Olivia mentioned. And I want to start this morning on, I guess, a purely personal note. I owe a real debt of gratitude to Darlington for giving me a superb college preparatory education. And two pillars of that foundation have been an ability to write clearly and, I think, fairly grammatically correctly. I hope. I still have visions of Doc Register telling me that there's a mistake there. And the second one is a genuine love of history. And these two gifts have been an important part of my personal history. As for heroes, there are a number of Darlington teachers who became personal heroes of mine. Two English teachers, Bert Hudnall and Doc Register, who were totally responsible for whatever writing ability I have. And then there's Jack Somerville, who truly imparted to me and countless other Darlington students a love of history and an appreciation of its importance. What a pleasure it is for me today to be able to thank Mr. Somerville once again in person today for his influence on me. The influence of these heroes, these Darlington heroes, goes far beyond mere college preparation. Their impact is what a Darlington education is all about. It's preparation for a lifetime of learning. And I'm very grateful for it. Next, I want to comment for just a minute on the significance of the setting today. The chapel remains at the very center of life here at Darlington. It was true when I was here, and I'm really pleased to see that that's still the case. Edmund Burke once said, "What is liberty without wisdom, and more importantly, without virtue?" And that's an important concept today, the concept of virtue. The social and political life of any community depends on individual private virtues, and the virtues held by Darlington have always found their fullest expression here in the chapel in the context of Christian formation. Very recently, and in fact I think it was last week, New York Times columnist David Brooks made some very interesting observations about American education. He was addressing the Association of Christian Colleges, and he addressed this statement specifically to them, but he could well have been talking to Darlington. What he said was, quote, "You, these colleges, these Christian colleges, have what everybody else is desperate to have. It's a way of talking about and educating the human person in a way that integrates faith, emotion, and intellect. Very few institutions in American society have that, and everyone wants it." End quote. Thankfully, Darlington was founded on this clear link between faith, emotion, and intellect. This kind of education is vitally important to our national political life, and it has been so since the founding of our republic. One of my favorite presidents, Calvin Coolidge, spoke these words in 1925. Quote, "Our government rests upon religion. It is from that source that we derive our reverence for truth and for justice, for equality and liberty, and for the rights of mankind. Unless the people believe in these principles, they cannot believe in our government." End quote. So just remember, chapel attendance is not some old-fashioned requirement, but it's rather an integral part of your education. Okay, now a word about heroes in history. Sadly, it seems a bit out of date to talk about heroes today. Recently, I was reading an interview with the well-respected young historian Eric Metaxas, and he was bemoaning the fact that a generation or so ago, all well-educated Americans knew American history pretty well and had their own list of heroes. But somehow, he says, in the 1960s, we stopped celebrating America and what it means to be an American. We decided we would focus on the negative narrative, the narrative that says, we are trouble, we're not the solution. The concepts of nobility and duty, these things are somehow part of some older order. Very sad. So there's some question today about whether or not we should even have heroes. And my answer is yes, we should. Again, remembering my personal heroes from Garland, and one of the joys of studying history is you get to think about who your heroes are in history. I recently, just last year, wrote my second book entitled Conservative Heroes, 14 Leaders Who Shaped America from Jefferson to Reagan. And it was with young people just like you that I had in mind as I wrote this book. I'll give a short pitch for the book. Any author would want to do that. And the thing I would certainly point out this morning is that it's pretty thin. It's not very, it has only 220 pages, and there are even some pictures in it. So it's not very tough reading. Hopefully that won't be intimidating for you. But it's my hope that it will prompt students to think through their own political principles, to look at history and how those principles have been applied, and yes, in the end, to find your own heroes, your own set of heroes. One of the great things about history is that everyone's political principles or worldview are not the same. You may read, if you read it, I guess you read the book, you may read it and decide you don't agree with my worldview, and that's fine. It'll help you think through yours. And consequently, everyone's list of heroes will not be the same. In this book, I define my worldview, which is, in today's terminology, called conservatism. It's been called a number of different terms over the years. But more broadly, I would encourage each of you to think through these principles for yourselves. Hopefully some of you will join me in embracing conservatism. I'd like to think maybe my case is compelling. But more importantly, each of you, if you read the book and think about it, will have thought through the issues, and in doing that, it will enable you to fulfill your role as citizens and perhaps even participants in the political process. After outlining my worldview in the beginning of the book, I then went on to profile the contributions of 14 American leaders who, because of their principled adherence to conservatism and their sense of honesty, honor, and duty, have become heroes for me. My list runs from Jefferson and Madison at the beginning of the Republic, down through Reagan, running chronologically down through American history. My list of heroes includes some who are well known, like Jefferson and Madison and Reagan, some who were somewhat vaguely known, Grover Cleveland, Calvin Coolidge, Robert Taft. Some who are pretty obscure. I'm not sure even Mr. Somerville had heard of a few of these. Nathaniel Bacon, John Davis, Josiah Bailey. But all of these were men, leaders who live principled lives of integrity. And I think whether you agree with my worldview or have a different worldview, you would appreciate the way that these leaders lived out their lives. And that, I think, can be an example to you in what you look for as a hero. Now, I don't have time this morning, if you're relieved to know, to comment at length on all the 14 leaders, but I'm going to try to give you a little one-line teaser that maybe will entice you to get your hands on a copy of the book and read it. I mentioned it starts with Jefferson and Madison. Jefferson was the hardest, I think, of the 14 leaders to classify as a conservative, but I think you can. The next two, much more obscure, Nathaniel Bacon and John Randolph. They were lifelong friends in Congress. They were sort of the quintessential odd couples of politics, very different in their personalities, but very similar in their political convictions. The fifth one was John C. Calhoun, by far the most difficult for 21st century Americans to appreciate because of the slavery issue. But Calhoun was a brilliant political thinker who talked and wrote about a lot more than slavery. And I think he's very much worth studying. The sixth one, Grover Cleveland, one of the most interesting and least appreciated, was the last conservative Democrat to serve as president, and a very interesting and underappreciated character, I think. 7 and 8 were Calvin Coolidge and Andrew Mellon. Coolidge was the most successful conservative American president in U.S. history, I would argue, and Mellon was his brilliant Secretary of the Treasury. Number 9 was the most obscure in the list, a man named Josiah Bailey. He was from North Carolina, which probably accounts for how I happened to know about him. But he was a leader in Congress and the Senate in the 1930s and led the fight to defeat FDR's court packing scheme and made some other contributions that I think were lasting to American history. Number 10, John Davis, a man who's sadly been very much forgotten. He was the Democratic nominee for president in 1924. One of the greatest American lawyers in history, argued more cases before the Supreme Court than any other American. Just an exemplary figure in terms of being absolutely above reproach in terms of integrity. Another man who had a similar reputation was a Republican, Robert Taft, who's number 11. Universally admired for his honesty. That's something that is very refreshing to read about, particularly in 2016. And then the last three were together, William Buckley, Barry Goldwater, and Ronald Reagan. And this trio led the ascendance of conservatism in the second half of the 20th century. And the story is how their lives were interwoven and their combined impact on American history. Now, I would invite you, if I can get you to read the book, to join me in thinking about your own list of heroes. Again, there will not necessarily be the same 14 that I picked. But this is the appeal of history. One historian has called history, and I think this is accurate, he called it an argument without end. History is not something that's settled by, it certainly won't be settled by you or me or our list of heroes. It's one of the engaging things about it. You can read it and come to your own conclusions, and in this case, pick your own heroes. Finally, I'm watching the clock, Grayson's smiling. I want to close with three simple, but I think profound points, which I hope you will remember as you go forward through your remaining time at Darlington, into college, and finally into adulthood. And the first point I leave you with is that ideas have consequences. Your beliefs about the central issues will shape your worldview and dictate your course of action. It is important that you begin now, as high school students, to think through your own worldview. Secondly, it's important to study history. I learned that from Mr. Somerville. Winston Churchill once advised, study history, study history. In history lie all the secrets of statecraft. We cannot say the past is the past without surrendering the future. History is the story of the ideas, actions, triumphs, and defeats of individuals. As President Truman once noted, men and women make history and not the other way around. To know where we should go in the future, it's essential to know where we've been in the past. And finally, the third idea I would leave with you is that although the modern examples may be few, and that's especially true in this 2016 election year, graciousness and civility are not outdated political attributes. Think about that a minute. We haven't seen a lot of graciousness and civility in the political process this year, but I certainly hope and I would argue that they're not outdated political attributes. It's possible to have a strong conviction does not preclude graciousness and civility. And likewise, graciousness and civility do not demand political ambivalence. You can have strong worldviews and hopefully still be gracious and civil. Despite all the unattractiveness of modern politics, a famous quote from Lord Tweezmuir still holds, and that is that public life is regarded as the crown of a career, and to the young men and women it is the worthiest ambition. Politics is still the greatest and most honorable adventure. I hope my book might convince you of this. Thank you.